A single yellow jacket nest can hold up to 15,000 stinging insects, and this pole barn was fighting an outright war. The homeowner had tried everything: store-bought traps, sprays, even a tennis racket, but the swarm kept building. Then a pest control expert named Travis showed up with his daughter McKenzie, and a plan so simple it sounded made up. 1 bucket of apple juice, a box of boric acid from the pharmacy aisle, and a method that promises to wipe out every aggressive wasp for half a mile without ever harming a honeybee. What you are about to see contradicts almost everything you have been told about insect control, because the real weapon was not poison. It was their appetite. Every year, yellow jacket queens emerge from hibernation and build empires from nothing. By late summer, a single nest can house thousands of aggressive defenders, and anyone who has mowed over a hidden entrance knows the panic that follows. Most people reach for a can of neurotoxin, but Travis saw a bigger problem. Spraying indiscriminately wipes out the bees that pollinate our food. So he spent 2 decades perfecting a system that exploits one simple fact: yellow jackets are scavengers, and honeybees are not. The answer was already sitting in his pantry. Travis had found that the difference between a bee and a yellow jacket is not in what they sting, but in what they eat. Honeybees feed on nectar and pollen, picking up trace sugars from flowers. Yellow jackets are scavengers, addicted to fallen fruit, open soda cans, and the sticky residue of a barbecue grill. The same sweet liquid that draws a honeybee from a mile away will pull yellow jackets from an entire colony. And Travis had spent years engineering a bait that only one of them would carry back to the nest. The property he pulled into that morning belonged to a retired mechanic named Jerry, who had called in desperation. His pole barn, a steel structure with open rafters, had become a fortress for paper wasps and yellow jackets. 5 separate nests dotted the beams, some the size of dinner plates, and the insects patrolled the entrance so aggressively that Jerry had not parked his tractor inside for 3 weeks. His wife had already been stung once, just walking to the garden shed. They were losing their own property to an enemy that reproduced faster than they could spray, and everything they had tried had made it worse. The box store poisons they fogged into the rafters, killed a handful of adults, and sent the rest into attack mode. The sticky traps caught a few hundred workers, but the queens kept laying eggs, and every day the colonies grew larger and more defensive. McKenzie, Travis's daughter, had been working with him since she was old enough to hold a flashlight steady. She was 17 now, calm around the insects, and she understood what her father had learned from decades in the field. Killing individual wasps does nothing if you leave the queen alive and the nest intact. The only way to eliminate the threat permanently is to trick the entire colony into destroying itself. So Travis walked Jerry through the 3-part weapon he was about to deploy: a liquid bait that would turn every foraging wasp into a delivery system for a slow-acting destroyer, a microscopic dust that would make every beam and rafter a lethal landing pad for months, and a freezing spray that would knock down visible nests in seconds without risking an electrical fire. The genius of the plan was not in the chemicals, it was in the timing, because yellow jackets eat twice a day at dawn and dusk, and Travis had arrived right at their hungriest hour. He reached into his truck and pulled out a gallon of apple juice and a white bucket, then handed McKenzie a small white box from the pharmacy aisle. Boric acid, the same powder you would use for an eye wash. And that is when Jerry asked the question Travis had been waiting for. If it is safe enough to put in your eyes, how can it possibly kill a wasp colony? Travis smiled. He said, "The dose makes the poison, and you are about to watch a mathematical certainty unfold. He unscrewed the cap of the boric acid and poured 3 tablespoons into a gallon of apple juice, then stirred the bucket with a wooden paint stick until the fine white powder vanished completely. What Travis had just created was a solution that looked and smelled exactly like a spilled soda, but with a payload that a yellowjacket's digestive system could never survive. The borate molecules interfere with enzyme function, slowly shutting down the insect's metabolism. It can take 12 to 48 hours for a worker to die, and that delay is the entire point. A wasp that drops dead on the spot never returns to the nest. A wasp that flies home with a crop full of sweet liquid feeds the queen, the larvae, and every other worker it encounters. The poison spreads through trophallaxis, the mouth-to-mouth food sharing that holds a colony together. What looks like a community turns into a chain reaction of collateral damage, and the queen, hidden deep inside the nest, never sees it coming. McKenzie took a clean soda can and poked 2 holes near the top, then threaded a twig through as a landing platform. Travis filled the can with the apple juice mixture and walked it to the far corner of the barn, as far from the house as possible, tucked under a beam where rain would not dilute it. He explained that boric acid at this concentration is virtually harmless to mammals. A dog could lap up the entire bucket and suffer nothing worse than an upset stomach. But for an insect with an exoskeleton and a shared digestive tract, it is a death sentence. And honeybees, he said, would never touch it, not because of any repellent, but because bees feed on floral nectar and pollen, not fermented fruit sugars in a dark barn. The yellowjackets, on the other hand, were already circling the can before McKenzie had even stepped back. Within 5 minutes, a dozen workers were crawling over the twig, sucking up the bait, and disappearing toward the nests in the rafters. Every single one of them was now a courier delivering poison to the queen. Then Travis moved to the second weapon. He pulled out a white plastic duster with a long metal wand and a bottle of delta dust, a fine white powder that contained 0.05% deltamethrin, a synthetic pyrethroid. To the human eye, it looked like talcum powder, but to an insect's nervous system, it was a permanent short circuit. The dust is hydrophobic, meaning it does not absorb moisture, so it stays lethal on a surface for up to 8 months. Travis loaded the duster and began puffing the powder along every rafter, every eave, every light fixture where a future queen might attempt to anchor a new nest. He worked slowly and deliberately, because the dust only works if the insect lands on it, and he waited until the workers had retreated into the nests before he started, knowing that a cloud of dust drifting into the open air would be just as deadly to a passing honeybee. The wind was dead calm. The timing was deliberate. The chemical was the same one commercial beekeepers use to protect their hives from wax moths, applied in a way that kept it exactly where yellowjackets land and honeybees never go. With the bait spreading its slow poison through the colonies and the rafters coated in a microscopic minefield, the only thing left was to eliminate the visible nests and the angry defenders still guarding them. McKenzie reached for a can of PT Wasp Freeze, an aerosol that fires a jet of foam up to 15 feet. The active ingredient is pralethrin, a compound that attacks the sodium channels in nerve cells. A single drop on an insect's body causes immediate paralysis, and unlike water-based sprays, the foam is non-conductive, meaning it is safe to spray around electrical wiring, light switches, and the metal beams of the pole barn. Jerry had been told his entire life never to spray liquid near an electrical box, and he had left the highest nest untouched because it sat inches from a main junction. McKenzie aimed the can, pressed the trigger, and sent a stream of white foam directly into the gray paper nest. Wasps dropped mid-flight. Those still inside the nest stopped moving before they could crawl out. The foam coated everything, then dried into a residue that would kill any survivors who returned. One by one, she hit all 5 nests while Travis climbed a ladder to reach the highest one. The one Jerry had been afraid to touch. He pressed the nozzle and the nest crumbled. Dead wasps spilling onto the concrete floor in a pile that would have terrified anyone who did not understand what had just happened. He picked up a few of the bodies and pointed out the queen among them. Larger, heavier, the center of a kingdom that had ruled this barn for months. The bait would catch any scout that returned, and the dust would stop the next queen before she ever started. But the real question was what would happen tomorrow. The next morning, Jerry walked out to the pole barn, half expecting to see a straggler or two still circling the rafters. Instead, he found silence. The soda can bait station was covered in dead yellowjackets, workers that had fed and died right there on the twig. But the real killing had happened out of sight. Travis and McKenzie returned to inspect the nests. Not a single live wasp. The foam had done its job, but the bait had done something far more devastating. Every worker that had carried the apple juice mixture back to the colony had passed the borate load through the food chain. Larvae that were fed the tainted liquid stopped developing. Newly emerged adults collapsed before their wings hardened, and the queen, hidden deep in her paper chamber, had ingested the poison from the mouths of her own daughters. A slow shutdown of her reproductive system that turned the nest into a nursery of corpses. Travis knelt beside the fallen nest and picked up the queen's body again, holding it toward Jerry. "This is what most people never see," he said. "They spray the nest, they knock it down, and they think they've solved the problem. But the queen is usually still alive, somewhere inside. She crawls out, finds a crack in the wall, and starts over again 2 weeks later. That is the reason hardware store wasp sprays fail 70% of the time. They are contact killers. If the blowback does not coat the queen, she survives. And a single surviving queen can lay 100 eggs a day for the rest of the summer. The nest you think you destroyed becomes 3 nests by August, except now they are inside the wall where you cannot see them." Jerry had been fighting yellowjackets for 3 years, and every summer he had made the same mistake. He would swat them, spray them, stomp them, and each time the alarm pheromone released by a crushed wasp marked his barn as a war zone. That chemical signal, undetectable to humans, travels on the wind for 100 yards and tells every yellowjacket in the vicinity that a threat is present and they need to attack. Jerry had been calling reinforcements to his own property. The damage of store-bought traps goes beyond pheromones. Travis pointed to a yellow plastic trap hanging from a tree at the edge of the property, the kind with a sweet attractant inside. "That thing caught maybe 200 wasps this month," he said. "Problem is, it attracted 2,000 more to your yard that never went inside. The syrupy lures in those traps are designed to pull yellowjackets from surrounding colonies, creating a scent plume that reaches 400 yards. For every wasp that drowns in the liquid, 10 more show up searching for the food source. And when they find no liquid to fall into, they fan out across your garden, your porch, your pole barn." Jerry had been baiting his own infestation by accident. "The worst part," Travis explained, "is that many of those traps use heptyl butyrate, a compound that mimics the chemical signature of ripe fruit, but does not distinguish between species. It attracts honeybees just as effectively as yellowjackets, especially when natural nectar sources are scarce in late summer. A beekeeper who sets one of those traps too close to a hive can lose 1/3 of their worker force in a week. The very tool marketed as a solution had been quietly destroying the insect that American agriculture depends on. And then there is the soap and water myth. McKenzie had seen dozens of online tutorials claiming that a spray bottle of dish soap and water kills wasps instantly. She tried it once on a small nest under a deck. The soap solution coated the wasps and they dropped, but within 30 minutes most of them were moving again. The science behind the failure is straightforward. Insecticidal soaps work by disrupting the waxy cuticle of soft-bodied pests like aphids, causing them to dehydrate. A yellowjacket's exoskeleton is thick and waterproof by design. Built to withstand rain and dew, the soap clogs their breathing pores, temporarily stunning them. But it rarely delivers a lethal dose. The nest she sprayed that day was rebuilt within 48 hours, and the colony was twice as aggressive. What looked like a cheap, non-toxic fix had only made the problem worse. Travis laid out these 3 failures for Jerry. Contact sprays miss the queen. Lure traps pull in more insects than they kill. Soap and water stun, but rarely eliminate. Every common piece of advice Jerry had followed for years had been amplifying the very threat he was trying to escape. The 3-part system turned all of that inside out. The boric acid bait used the colony's own social structure as a delivery mechanism. The dust turned every landing surface into a permanent but passive killer that only activated when an insect touched it. So a honeybee passing through the barn on its way to a nearby flower would never land on a treated rafter. The freezing foam provided instant knockdown without drifting pheromones, because the rapid immobilization prevented the dying wasp from releasing its attack signal. This was not pest control by volume of poison. It was precision engineering built on the deepest patterns of insect behavior. And as Travis walked Jerry through what had happened inside those nests over the preceding 18 hours, the real revelation was not that the Yellowjackets were dead. It was that the entire mechanism of their collapse had been invisible to the human eye. No smoke, no fog, no chemical smell. Just a can of apple juice and a box of boric acid, followed by a quiet cascade of biological failure. The promise of the method was not a kill. It was a 40-year guarantee that no yellowjacket queen would ever successfully build a nest on that property again, because the rafters themselves had become uninhabitable. The question now was whether the same could work for anyone on any property, without ever risking the one insect that keeps America fed. The answer came 3 weeks later when Travis got a text from Jerry. A single sentence. Not a single yellowjacket all summer. No traps, no foggers. No frantic phone calls to an exterminator. Just the leftover dust on the rafters and a bait station he refreshed once a week with apple juice and boric acid. The 50-cent solution had done what $300 in hardware store products could not. And the reason went deeper than poison. Honeybees never entered that barn because honeybees navigate by ultraviolet light and floral scent trails. They forage in open fields, not dark steel buildings, and they communicate food sources through a dance language that prioritizes nectar concentration over the smell of fermented fruit. A yellowjacket follows a completely different algorithm. It scavenges randomly, drawn to any sugar source it stumbles across, and when it finds one, it returns to the colony with no dance, no directions, just a chemical trail that leads other scavengers directly to the bait. Travis had designed a trap that exploited a fundamental difference in mission. The honeybee is a pollinator, carrying the genetic future of a flower. The yellowjacket is a garbage collector, and garbage collectors get poisoned by what they eat. A single bait station within 200 yards of a nest can wipe out an entire colony in 72 hours. Not because the dose is lethal to one wasp, but because the trophylactic network of a yellowjacket colony touches every member within a single feeding cycle. Scientists call this horizontal transfer. A worker returns with a crop full of tainted sugar, feeds 20 larvae and a dozen other workers, and each of those insects feeds an exponential chain that reaches the queen before dawn. By the time the first dead wasp hits the floor, the entire nest is already compromised, and because boric acid is a stomach poison rather than a nerve agent, there is no alarm response, no defensive swarming, no chemical signal warning the next generation. The colony dies in silence, and the queen dies inside the only structure she ever knew. But the most important piece of the system was not the bait. It was the dust. Delta dust, applied once in early summer, remains lethal on a surface for up to 8 months. That means any new queen that emerges in late summer and searches for a place to overwinter, any scout that investigates a crack in the siding, any worker that lands on a beam after the bait has run dry, all of them make contact and die within hours. And because the dust is applied to the undersides of rafters and eaves, places where honeybees never alight, the risk to pollinators is functionally zero. The application timing matters too. Travis returns in early spring, before the first yellowjacket queen wakes up, and dusts the same surfaces again. The cycle repeats, and every year, the wasp pressure in a half-mile radius drops lower than the year before, because there are fewer queens to start new colonies. Jerry's barn was the epicenter of a dead zone, and the honeybees in his neighbor's apiary never noticed a thing. This is the part that most pest control companies will not tell you, because they profit from repeat visits. The spray they apply in June requires another spray in July, and a third in August, and a bill each time. The do-it-yourself methods on the internet push soapy water and essential oils, because they are safe and cheap, but they do not work against a colony with a queen that can replace every dead worker overnight. Travis figured out that you do not fight the workers. You fight the reproductive engine, and you do it with a weapon so old that the patent office would laugh if you tried to file it. Boric acid has been used as an insecticide for over 100 years. It is a naturally occurring mineral mined from the earth, the same compound doctors prescribe for eye infections, and at a concentration of 1% in sugar water, it is the most selective wasp killer on the market. No resistance, no drift, no honeybee casualties. Just a taste that a yellowjacket cannot refuse, and a physiology that cannot survive it. Jerry got his barn back. His wife gardens, again without a bee veil, and somewhere in the wall of a shed, 200 yards away, a yellowjacket queen that would have built a nest next spring died before the first frost, poisoned by the bait carried home by a worker she never met. The entire confrontation happened without a single honeybee ever landing on a treated surface, because the real difference between a pest and a pollinator is not what they look like, it is where they land and what they eat. Know that, and you never have to spray a single flower to kill a single wasp. Most of what we are told about controlling the natural world is filtered through a marketing department. Buy this spray, hang this trap, call this number. But Travis and McKenzie proved something different. They proved that the most effective weapon against a pest is not a chemical. It is an understanding. When you know what a yellowjacket eats, where it lands, and how it feeds its young, you do not need a fogger. You need a soda can and a box of powder from the pharmacy aisle. The same principle applies to every garden, every barn, every backyard in America. Before you reach for the poison, ask what the insect actually wants. And if you are the kind of person who believes that the best solutions are the ones that work with nature instead of against it, then you already know what to do next. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next, because we are going deeper into the methods that the pest control industry hopes you never find. And if the content you just watched made sense to you, there is a special offer waiting for you through the link in the first pinned comment below. It is the fastest way to get everything we talked about today in one place. Thank you for watching. Stay curious.